theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive with Em and Warren.
Hello, Suzy Wrong.
Everybody at Joy Drive Smart Fun Radio, I am pretending it's not happening.
I actually, you know what, Suzy? When we chatted just before off air, I was like, I can't believe Suzy hasn't mentioned that this is our last Suzy Wrong chat.
I am pretending that nothing terrible is happening to me and the world.
Oh, Suzy.
When is your last day? When is your actual last day?
Tomorrow is my last day.
Wow.
Warren's threatening to not come in because he doesn't want to face it.
I'm throwing a sickie tomorrow.
So if Warren's not on air, you know why. He doesn't want to face it.
Oh, it's hard to face for everyone, not just Warren and myself.
It's been such a pleasure to chat to you each and every week, Suzy. I can't say more than that because I will maybe cry. But
we'll leave that to a little bit later.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks, Suzy.
Today,
let's get to the important stuff.
That's right. We are talking about Queens of the Queer Underground, which is streaming on ABC iView. Suzy, what's it about?
3 short documentaries, all produced by Sydney filmmaker Christina Wong Foster, are compiled by ABC and given the name Queens of the Queer Underground. You can find them on iView by searching KWEENS Queens. The first film, Lesbians on the Loose, is named after the iconic Sydney publication, placing focus on the early years from its origins in the late 80s. It is a sentimental tribute to trailblazers Barb and Frances, who created one of the world's foremost lesbian publications, and it's a nostalgic recollection of the important part print media had played in the way queer people were able to connect before the advent of the internet. The second film is I Am Kai, featuring Aboriginal brother boy Kai Clancy, a model and influencer, offering insight into life as a 20-something trans man. It is a meaningful exploration into queer Indigenous life, with participation from his father and his wife, both offering really moving interviews about the man they love. The final installment is Are You Into Labels? A simple conversation between 3 queer people, helping us figure out the quagmire of terminology being used these days in our community. Some of those labels include demisexual, pansexual, bisexual, bi-erasure, twunk, switch, bottom shaming, and pig bottom. It is interesting to see how each of these characters position themselves within an increasingly broad spectrum of the rainbow family. The more each of them describes their identity and preferences, the more we are able to see that it is precisely our differences that brings us together. These 3 films in Queens of the Queer Underground are fairly light and breezy, all showing us how people in our community are living good lives without needing them to reveal too much of their private struggles. I enjoyed seeing the changing face of queerness as we transform into something less monolithic and therefore much more accepting than before. And then, Warren, how good are queer people?
The best.
That's
The
it.
best.
Thanks, Suzy.
Period.
We'll see you next
That's
week.
It. Bye. I really enjoyed this series. As always, you know, things to be learned and beautiful stories to be told. I really, really loved the I'm Kai episode. I thought that was really special, and what a lovely relationship that's developed over time between Kai and his dad. Just beautiful, a lovely thing. And you know what's really cool about this series? 2 things. One, they're just like 10-minute episodes, but
It's
you're
like
getting
having a coffee with them.
Totally, but you're getting something. It's not like, oh, you know, we've watched series that have gone on for 8 hours and been like, we needed more. They gave us nothing. We're getting these 10-minute bite-sized episodes that are giving us so much, and I really appreciated that. I also loved the fact that all of them, in fact, were written and directed by different people. They were produced by the same person, you said, Suzy, but written and directed by different people. So they were kind of standalone stories. If you just watched one, fine, but if you watch all 3, it's like, you know, you're getting these 3 different avenues of exploring queer histories, which I just loved.
I agree. I've got to say, like, if we take one episode, you know, the one about lesbians on the loose, I mean, such a quick episode, but how much did we learn in that episode? You know, that fascinating story of a grassroots magazine and the importance that the role of that magazine played in a time when there wasn't social media. And it took me back to when I was coming out and, relying on certain magazines, and those classifieds and all of this. And it was so good to see that this was happening. And I think it's still going as Lottle now, but
it is, yeah.
Online.
Yep.
But that role that they play in our development.
It was so funny watching the interviewees talk about the classified ads.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think people from that generation remembered how embarrassing the whole thing was, but we kind of I think most of us would have dabbled a little bit in that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the I completely forgot about them and how far away it's. I suppose, it's in a way, it made me think that there's so much history, isn't there, as we get older, and I don't want this history to be lost.
Yeah, it's separate from club culture, but we had spoken several times about how club culture had faded so much over years because everything's gone online, etc. But we've forgotten about how much print was a part of our lives for me in the 90s. It was so central. We would look for, and it was so important that a city like Sydney could have 2-3 gay publications that came out weekly. There was so much advertising that was available to them. And then there's so many events that they were able to cover on top of all the news and the gossip from just generally Sydney life. And it was such a vibrant scene that allowed for such vibrant, interesting reading. And now, virtually all of it's gone.
We're chatting to Suzy Wrong about Queens of the Queer Underground, which you can find on ABC iView. Em and Suzy, I really loved the discussion around the labels. It's something that I've struggled with, of why we always put ourselves into labels if we don't necessarily fit one perfectly. I thought the discussion was great. I thought it was so refreshing to see young people discussing labels. And basically, I feel like there's a bit of a movement away from using them. And I felt quite invigorated and refreshed after hearing this discussion, thinking, you know what, we're not the only ones that are questioning whether we really should be attaching these labels to us in order to have an identity.
Yeah, it was good that they spoke a little bit about why these labels persist and how much as we want to just basically be seen as human, the labels actually do have a function in helping us create community, especially. And it's funny that you said young people, because I watched them as young people as well, but I think there was a moment in there when they were talking about young people.
Yes, there was. Yeah, well, I guess, and that's the thing, because they in that particular episode, they were, early to mid 30s. They were all 33, 36, thereabouts, and they were saying that even the younger generation from them, so that would be the Zers, Gen Zs, they use labels to serve them rather than the label slapped on them and that's who they are, which I think is really lovely. And Warren, you're talking to this, and I do think that, of course, having a label can help with, hey, I want to meet other people in the same community as me. I want to meet the other people that have the same, kinks or whatever it is that you're looking for. But then you can take that label off if you want to.
Yeah,
or
without
you can,
the pressure.
Yeah, basically what they're saying is the use of labels is to serve, and if it's not serving you, then don't use the label.
Which I think is great, because I always felt like there was a bit of a pressure to identify with one of the, the letters of the acronym. The only thing that I hope is that, as we move into, I don't want to say a labelless, community, but as some of us shed those labels or embrace not using those labels, we also accept that there are people that do want to use those labels. And it is part of their identity and they feel good about it. So I just hope we don't create another divide within our community.
Yeah. And also it was good the way they were talking about it in quite a light-hearted manner. It kind of makes you feel a bit less pressured about, not understanding everything.
Yeah.
It kind of shows that nobody understands everything, really.
Totally. And I do think that they very strategically had 3 people in that conversation that did have slightly different views on the use of labels, which of course is why they got those 3 people. But it was nice to have someone in there that said, hey, you know what? I get pronouns wrong sometimes, but as long as it's coming from a place of love and caring, then, that is okay. And that same person was kind of like, I don't understand most of the labels. I don't know. And it was nice to have that voice in that discussion, because I'm sure there are many people that sit in that same position thinking the exact same way.
And the labels were, I like the way they flashed up. So when they talked
Defined
about
them.
terminology or labels, and we didn't know what they meant, it came up and it defined it. So we all knew at the end of the episode what all these labels meant.
Totally.
Some of it's so funny though.
Some were quite funny.
Some were quite funny and probably not appropriate for this time. And I like that aside from them labeling, like you were able to observe these three people and for me to kind of look at, like I said earlier, the face of new queerness and how they are so different from my generation, especially I can't remember the Latinx person who I think uses she, they pronouns, and she has a full beard, you know.
She's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me to understand that you can express your transness and your femaleness in such a radical way these days. It's so incredibly freeing for everyone.
Absolutely. I think the series as a whole opened up, you know, a door to younger queer people and the way in which they are approaching things, and then even people that are younger than them again. And the other thing that I loved about this series on a like fundamental sort of structural level is if that is to teach people stuff, and like I can imagine, because I think I could imagine that in like a high school. You could play a 10-minute episode and then have a discussion about, you know, labels. You could have a 10-minute episode and then have a discussion about what it means to be, you know. So these are really great bite-sized pieces. And I think for a generation and even just people now, because Warren, we're not the same generation, but we're so addicted to our phones. We're constantly, you're not really a scroller, but anyway, we have really short attention spans. So having these bite-sized episodes is just practically very clever.
Absolutely. And in those 3 short episodes, you know, we had a full spectrum of ages as well and experiences.
Exactly.
So really compact. I liked it, Suzy.
Yeah, I love that. It was so informative. And I love that people make films like that and it becomes sort of a permanent archive of our history. Because a lot of this stuff, if you don't record it down this way, it's so easy to forget because we are not sort of part of the general history. You know, we're still like a subculture, I suppose. So it's easy if we're not careful to lose a lot of this stuff, especially with the young people stuff, because it can almost feel like it's fleeting. Like the labels, for example, many of those labels will probably no longer hold the same meaning in 5-10 years time. So it's nice to have this as a documentation. And you know, we really have to stress that the importance of having Kai stories included because because the indigenous aspect, the indigenous dimension is often forgotten and left out. I think maybe because they have a different way of talking about queer experiences, and we haven't been able to hear their voices as often as we should. And it was really good that Kai was able to speak loud and proud as an Aboriginal brother boy and include his very, very loving father and sort of forming that example of what acceptance can look like for people of color.
Absolutely. I loved that episode.
I loved his father too. I mean, how curious and open and
very generous with his.
Yeah.
You know, he was like, you know, initially I was like, I don't know, I don't get it, I absolutely have no idea. And then you felt his you know, evolution of someone that had no idea to someone that's, you know, 100% behind their son, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just be a goddamn father. So
exactly.
simple.
Totally.
We are talking about Queens of the Queer Underground on ABC iView. Suzy, what will we be talking about next week?
Next week, we're looking at one of my old favorites on ABC, Compass, the series about religion, spirituality, and ethics. We'll be looking at 2 episodes. Last week's was entitled Peacock Mormons, and this Sunday's The Love of My Life, consecutive weeks of queer content on the 40-year-old TV show that will just be myself and Warren, because M is off to greener pastures.
Yes, I won't. Okay, I was thinking about this last night, and I think, I'm going to do my best to still do your homework, Suzy, because it is always such a pleasure. And even if it's not something I like, it's something that makes me curious or piques my interest. So,
Or we learn.
Exactly, or I learn. So I'm going to do my very best to keep doing your homework, Suzy.
That's lovely. I want to say publicly that not just having this Tuesday chat with you and Warren has been, fantastic. And it feels like it keeps getting better. But I also want to say that your friendship is very valued. I have a lot of love for you. And I hope to see us develop further outside of this arena.
Oh, Suzy, you're going to make me cry. I love you dearly too. And I really am so grateful for, as you said, not only these chats, but for your friendship as well. I love you to the moon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you got me crying. Thanks.
And good luck with everything. I have so much faith in your success.
Thanks, Suzy. Thanks so much.
And if we're driving
right.
through Bendigo, we'll be able to hear you.
You sure will. You sure will.
And I'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks, Suzy. So that is on ABC. We're watching Compass. Peacock Mormons is one episode, and The Love of Our Life is the other one.